Okay, let us continue on our discussion on this licensing concept. So yesterday we started off our discussion on that basic platform edition. So as we discussed that the platform edition, most basic core components are this: the database server, a HANA database server, and a couple of prerequisites if you want to run HANA database server in your company. So one, you need to have certified hardware. That's what we call it as appliance, and then you need to install Linux operating system, because you're allowed to run HANA database server only on Linux operating system. And then once you have database server running, when you want to work from the client workstations and to perform different activities, depending on your roles and responsibilities, the graphical tool provided to you is called HANA Studio. So that HANA Studio, you can use it for different activities. It can be used for administration, modeling, development, all these different activities you can perform. And apart from that, when you want to connect to the database connectivity, you need drivers, and all those drivers required to communicate with your HANA database, like JDBC, ODBC, all these drivers are provided in a small software called HANA Client. So these all things we had a detailed discussion yesterday. But apart from this, there are more components SAP is providing as part of this platform edition, which you can basically call them as optional software components. So the reason why we call them as optional software components, these components, as and when there is a requirement for the customer, he can utilize them. It's not mandatory to install these components. So let us see what are those software components SAP is offering and what is the significance of those software components. So in that, the first and foremost one is a very popular one called Smart Data Access. This software component was not available at the beginning. As I told you, SAP HANA general availability started with 1.0 SPS 03. The Smart Data Access was not available at that time. Later on, somewhere in SPS 05, SAP started providing this Smart Data Access functionality. It became very popular. Most of the customers have started using it. So try to understand what is the significance of this Smart Data Access. I'll give a business example. A simple business use case I'll give you. Try to understand. Suppose you consider a situation where a customer want to use SAP HANA as a data warehousing solution, or you want to use HANA as a data mart. So what's the meaning of that? Look at this customer. This is actually a beverages company. This company is a beverages company where SAP HANA was implemented way back. The purpose of using this SAP HANA database in these companies, they want to use HANA database for analytics. So look at this, what they try to do here. Later on, we are going to deal with or discuss these detailed architectures, landscape architectures, but try to understand this. What they're trying to do here is, so they set up HANA database here, and they have data in existing sources. They have some data in SAP ERP systems and non-SAP sources. And what they want to do is, whatever the existing data in their company, they want to analyze the data by using SAP HANA. Because using SAP HANA, we can perform high performance analysis. That's why this company, this customer want to use HANA database for that high performance analysis, and they want to analyze that existing data. So they set up HANA database, they load the data into this HANA database, and then designing some reports, they want to analyze the data. That's the requirement of this company. Understand, we are directly working with the database, no applications here. So this is one business use case, very popular one actually. Many of the customers are using HANA for this kind of analytical solution. But now, here is a requirement of this customer. Say example, that customer is having total data. What you can call it as source data, means that the data you want to analyze. Say example, is having 10 TB of source data. Requirement is this 10 TB data you want to analyze by using SAP HANA. But even though his requirement is performing analysis of this 10 TB data, out of this 10 TB data, 2 TB is latest data, that is recent data, maybe last 1 year, 1.5 year data, like that. And this data, they want to perform a real-time analysis with high performances. Understand? 2 TB data, which is recent data, they want to analyze it real time. Regularly, they want to analyze it every moment, and they want to analyze it with high performances. They want to have very high performance for that data. Whereas the remaining 8 TB data, it's a little bit old data. They want to analyze this data also, but they access it rarely. And not worried about performance. Because they access it very rarely. Maybe, say example, they want to use it only for auditing purpose. Only auditing when they want to analyze this data. Maybe once in a year, or once in a 6 months, once in a year, they want to analyze this data, and they are not at all worried about the performance when they are analyzing this 8 TB data. Now, ultimately the requirement is they want to analyze this entire data by using HANA only. Now this customer is asking you to provide a cost-effective solution for you. So you have to suggest the customer a cost-effective solution. So what you can suggest this customer? The point here is, can you suggest this customer to store this entire 10 TB data in HANA? Is it meaningful to suggest to store this entire 10 TB data in HANA? Think about it. When you are speaking about storing this much of data in HANA database, HANA database is basically in-memory database. You are speaking about storing the data in the memory. Storing the data in the memory is always expensive. It's really expensive. And if you have any doubt about storing the data, cost of storing the data in the memory, simple comparison you do. Suppose you spend 5,000 rupees, you get 8 GB RAM. But same 5,000 rupees you spend, you will get 1 TB hard drive. Now you know what's the cost of storing the data in the memory. So it's really expensive. So you can't blindly suggest the customer saying that, okay, store this entire 10 TB data in HANA in memory, because that's very expensive. And that too, it's not so meaningful to store this 8 TB data in SAP HANA in memory when you're rarely accessing it. Only once in a year when you're accessing, and that too when you're not worried about performance. There's no point in storing this 8 TB data in HANA in memory. So that's why what you can suggest in this situation is, what we can suggest this customer is, okay, as this 2 TB data, which is the recent data, is so important for them, we can ask this customer to load this data into HANA database. Load into HANA and store it in memory. Because, and that data is very crucial for them, they analyze this data very frequently and they want to have high performance analysis for this data. So it's recommended to load this data and store it in HANA in memory. Okay, that's fine. That's what here they are loading the data and then they build some models and go for reporting. They can analyze the data with high performances. That's fine. But now what about this data? This 8 TB data, you don't want to store it in HANA. Understand the requirement. They don't want to store it in HANA because if they try to store it in HANA, it's going to be expensive for them. So they don't want to store it in HANA, but they want to analyze the data by using HANA. Now comes the question, how can you analyze the data without storing it in HANA? You want to analyze the data using HANA, but you don't want to store it in HANA. How is it possible? It is possible. What SAP is recommended here in these kind of situations is, don't load this 8 TB data into HANA database. Instead of loading this data into HANA database, you keep it outside HANA database. That outside HANA database where we store this data or keep the data, that's what we call it as NLS. NLS stands for near line storage. NLS stands for near line storage. So for these near line storages, they can use any software. The near line storage can be, they can use any softwares, like they can use Hadoop. So they can use Sybase IQ, anything like this. Oracle, SQL Server, anything. If already they have the data in that Oracle database, SQL database, or a Hadoop file system, or Sybase IQ, that's it. Okay, you don't need to do anything there. So this 8 TB data, which you don't want to load into HANA, you keep it outside HANA database, which we call it as NLS, nearline storage. But now the requirement is, whenever you want to analyze this data has to be accessed into the HANA database. You don't want to store it, but even though you don't want to store it, you need to access it. Only when you access, you'll be able to analyze the data using HANA. So that's when what we have to do is here, this is where in HANA database itself, you can install this functionality called Smart Data Access. What this smart data access will allow you to do is, this will allow you to connect to NLS systems. Smart data access will allow you to connect to the nearline storage systems. Maybe Hadoop, maybe Sybase IQ, maybe Teradata. That facility they have provided to you there. So once you establish a connection to this nearline storage system, you can access the data, understand the difference between loading and accessing. Loading means you're storing the data in HANA, whereas when you're speaking about accessing, you're reading the data from this nearline storage system. So there is remote source systems. You process the data and present the data to the end users in the form of reports. You are not storing it in HANA. So ultimately your job is done. You are able to analyze the data using HANA, but you are not storing the data in HANA. See how simple is that? In fact, the smart data access is a very small component which will take hardly 2 seconds. Installation of that component will take hardly 2 seconds. You have to do it in HANA database server itself. Just a matter of 2 seconds. And then the connectivities and all that, they can establish hardly in a matter of 15-20 minutes. Such a small component, but see the impact as far as the entire solution is concerned. So this is what you need to understand. It's not just knowing that or saying that HANA is a database server. No, you need to understand the different software components offered by SAP and the significance of those components. Then only you'll realize the real potential capabilities of SAP HANA. See, such a simple functionality and a huge impact as far as solutions is concerned. So many customers are using it. Okay, so that's the purpose of your smart data access. So here is the simple bottom line. Smart data access, which can be installed in the HANA database server, will allow you to connect to the nearline storage systems and access the data into HANA. So that once you access the data into HANA, you can analyze the data and present the data in the form of reports. No doubt, as whenever a report is executed, this data has to come from the remote source systems, from the NLS systems. Obviously, performance will be low, no doubt in that. Performance will be definitely low. So anyhow, they are not worried about it. Ultimately, what matters for them is the cost factors. That's all. Is what we can propose to that customer. Okay, so this is something which SAP has introduced around SPS 05 version, 1.0 SPS 05 version onwards. So there onwards it became very popular. And similarly, there is one more relevant component here which was introduced by SAP from SPS 9. There is some relevance with this. That's why I'm mentioning that now itself. So there is a functionality called dynamic tiering. It's a new concept. Dynamic tiering is a new concept which SAP has introduced from SPS 9. So what's the purpose of this? In what way that is relevant to the smart data access functionality we discussed? So to understand this, actually, SAP started using this dynamic tiering functionality, particularly when they implement BW on HANA. BW application when they are implementing on HANA, or latest version of BW is BW for HANA. They started using it. So what is that? What is the significance and what is the purpose of this? See, to understand that, all these warehousing solutions are mainly they're meant for data management. So when it comes to data management, there are so many different architectures available. What SAP has done is SAP came up with a new data management architecture for big data maintenance. That data management, they call it as multi-temperature data management. Understand this. For any organization, data management is so crucial. So SAP introduced this multi-temperature data management. Say in BW. So as per this multi-temperature data management, what basically they do here is they categorize the data. As you can see in this diagram here, they categorize the data like cold data, warm data, hot data. So how do you do that? On what basis you decide this is the hot data, this is warm data, this is cold data? This purely depends on the frequency. How frequently you access the data, based on that you decide, okay, this is the hot data, this is warm, this is cold. The data which we access very frequently is hot data. Very frequently, every moment you are accessing it. The data we access it very rarely, which we call it as sporadic access. Very rarely, as I just now explained, maybe once in a year, call it as sporadic access. That kind of data we call it as cold data. And the data which we have infrequent access, like maybe once in 2 hours, once in a while you're doing it, then we call it as warm data. You know where to keep hot data, you know where to keep cold data. Just now we discussed about that. Hot data, it's obvious that you keep it in SAP HANA in memory. Where there's no restriction, all the functionalities available, performance will be very, very high if you store it in HANA in memory. Cold data, which is sporadic access, rarely accessed one. So obviously, we don't prefer to store it in HANA. We store it in the nearline storage. And when you store it in the nearline storage, obviously that's outside HANA database. Obviously, it's restricted. You can't try to do everything with that. But you'll be able to access this nearline storage data by using smart data access functionality, and you can perform analysis of the data where performance will be low. You can see that this performance. Where to keep this warm data? That's the question now, which is infrequent access data. Maybe once in 2 hours, once in a day, something like that when you're accessing. If you want to keep it in the memory, definitely more memory it will occupy. It's going to be more expensive. So to make it more effective, what SAP has done is they've introduced this HANA dynamic tiering concept. HANA dynamic tiering. Using that functionality, SAP came up with this non-active data concept. So non-active data, which they are not accessing it now, so that you can store it on the disk. That's not the default functionality. Remember, storing it on the disk is not a default functionality in HANA. Default functionality in HANA is the primary data storage is memory. But here we are speaking about primarily storing the data on the disk, infrequently accessed data. That will be loaded into memory only when it's accessed. But remember that when you say on disk, that is within HANA only, not outside. That is within HANA only. Both hard data and warm data will be within HANA. Only cold data will be outside HANA. But storing the data on the disk is less expensive. So all that non-active data, you can keep it on the disk. Load it onto the memory only when you access it. So obviously you're able to balance that. The performance will be medium, intermediate. It's not that too high, it's not that too low. But that is possible only when you have this HANA dynamic tiering functionalities implemented. So they provide it as a separate software. So once you set up that, and you can start utilizing that non-active data concept. In fact, the new versions of BW, particularly in BW for HANA, it's having such a kind of built-in intelligence. It's having built-in intelligence where system itself will decide which data is frequently accessed, which data is infrequently accessed. So system itself will decide which one is hard data and warm data. So that we don't need to tell the system. Anyhow, in some applications like S4 HANA, S4 HANA is also that new generation, fourth generation business suite solution. There they have a concept called data aging. Data aging means you can define, okay, this is the old data. You can make it as a non-active data. But whereas as far as BW is concerned, that is totally automated. Okay, so that's a built-in intelligence we have there. Okay, just a moment. From all these things, different kind of new concepts and features and functionalities SAP is offering. So what you should understand that as and when some requirements comes from the customers, if SAP feels like, okay, this is a requirement generally every customer will have, if it's really helpful for all the customers, they're coming up with some functionality immediately. These are not expected at the beginning. So as and when there is this demand for something, SAP started coming up with something. So all these new functionalities SAP kept on adding slowly one after another. But ultimately, these are all very, very helpful for the customers. May not be for all the customers, but whoever is really interested to implement, they have a real kind of requirement now, or real business use cases they have, they will be able to implement this functionality. So this is what I'm telling you right from the beginning. Try to understand what SAP is offering as part of the HANA. Don't think about only database servers. A lot of other components also you need to understand. Okay, so that's another aspect of it. So one more important thing happened slowly later on. There were some customers where they have already stored data in something like Hadoop file system. Say example, assume that there is another customer is having suppose say almost same 10 TB of data, but this entire 10 TB data stored Hadoop file system. Hadoop is a file system. Hadoop file system, they stored it, which it doesn't want to change. You want to keep the data in Hadoop file system only. But this customer heard about the analytical capabilities of HANA. HANA database server, the special advantage you have is you can use it as a database server. Not only that, a lot of additional functionalities SAP is offering. One of the most important functionalities highly advanced analytical capabilities we have. Because in HANA itself, they have embedded some analytical engine, so which will allow you to perform this analytics more effectively. Now, this customer heard about this analytical capabilities of HANA. So what this customer want to do is, you want to use HANA for this data analysis. Understand? This customer want to analyze the data by using HANA, but he want to keep the data in the Hadoop file system only. He doesn't want to load this data into HANA database. Now this customer wants solution. Now again, same question, what we can suggest this customer? The point is, can we suggest this customer to go with that previous scenario, that is smart data access, where they set up HANA database, they'll install smart data access, connect to the Hadoop file system, access this data, analyze the data. Can we suggest that? You're not going to store the data in HANA. You want to analyze the data by using HANA. Is it meaningful to suggest that customer to go for a HANA database server and then install smart data access and access the data, analyze the data? The simple answer is no, you can't. The reason is, you know the database server main functionality. For what purpose we use database servers? Any database server, we use it for storing the data. That's the primary function of a database. But here requirement is not storing the data, requirement is only analyzing the data. When you are not going to store the data, what is the point in asking the customer to buy HANA database server license? Will the customer is interested? No way customer will be interested. When he's not storing the data, no customer will be willing to buy a database server license. The second thing is, in case if you want to run database server, you need to buy appliance. That is also expensive. So we can't suggest this customer to buy database server license, install it on an appliance, and then install smart data access the data into HANA, analyze the data. No way this customer will be interested in that. That's why what SAP has done is, as this customer is looking for only the analytical capabilities of HANA, not the database capabilities, only analytical capabilities. What SAP started doing is, they started providing that analytical engine separately, only that SAP HANA analytical engine. And that's what they named it as HANA Aura. No abbreviation there. It's just called HANA Aura. What is HANA Aura? HANA Aura, in simple terms, it's analytical engine of HANA database. They separately provided. Now what this customer can do now on top of this Hadoop, just simply install HANA Aura, that's it. No special hardware, no database server, nothing is needed. You can install HANA Aura on top of this Hadoop and do analysis of the data using that analytical capabilities of HANA. Simple solution. Anyhow, to begin with, they're given it on Hadoop, so they're going to extend this functionality for other sources also later on. See the way the thinking is going on and the solutions they're coming up with. That's what's the speciality here. Okay, so these are all some additional optional software component provided by SAP. So whenever a customer needs them, so he can just utilize them. And apart from this, there are few more other components also. Like example, you have something called AFL. This AFL is there right from the beginning. It's not a new thing that they have right from SPS 03 itself. AFL means application functional libraries. Application functional libraries. You know functions, you might have heard about functions, database functions, functions, procedures, they call them as. So AFL is nothing but application function library is nothing but ready-made functions provided by SAP. What is a function or what is a function or what is a procedure in database? It's basically a program. So meaning of that is they are providing ready-made programs for you. So what you can do with those programs? Now consider a situation. Suppose there is a customer, a big customer. So he is using HANA for his analytics, which they are able to do it effectively. Now, what that customer want to do is he want to perform something called predictive analysis. So there is a kind of analysis called predictive analysis, very popular. All the big enterprises they want to have this predictive analysis. So basically, predicting the business in the future based on the past data and all that. So whenever that customer want to implement that predictive analysis, it is possible. It is possible to implement predictive analysis in SAP HANA. But if they want to implement that predictive analysis, they need to write a lot of programming code. The entire programming code they need to write from the scratch. So if they have to write the programming code and implement that predictive analysis, it will take a lot of time. Obviously, it's too expensive for them. And to handle those situations, what SAP is doing? SAP is providing ready-made functions for you, ready-made programs they are giving to you. So what the customer can do, they can utilize the functions, the ready-made programs available in this AFL, part of that AFL, and they can implement that predictive analysis. So that's the purpose of that AFL. So a simple statement we can give like this. AFL is nothing but the ready-made functions offered by SAP to implement some additional functionalities like predictive analysis. That's just an example. Don't get confused in case sometimes they're using the terms like PAL, predictive analysis library, and there is something called BFL, business function libraries. Actually, this PAL, BFL, all these are part and parcel of AFL only. So it's provided as a separate component. What you need to do is you need to install it on the HANA database server. Once you install this AFL, all those functions will be available for the developers. The developers can utilize those functions and implement that predictive analysis. So that's the purpose of AFL. Is there right from the beginning. It's not a new thing. And then coming to the next one, in SPS 08, SAP came up with something called HANA Answers. This was in SPS 08. But somehow SAP has discontinued that. SPS 9 onwards, there is no support for this. But just remember a small thing. All of you might be knowing about F1 help. So whenever you're working in any environment, anywhere, you need some information, you just press F1, some predefined text will be displayed. Like you want some syntax or some information about anything, Any working environment will have that F1 help, where there is a predefined text and that help will be displayed to you. This HANA answers is also similar to that, but more advanced, lot more advanced. It's a kind of help only. Suppose you're working in HANA Studio. Now you want to take a backup. You don't know the details about backup. You don't know how to take backup, what type of backups available. This information you don't have. Now you want to know that. You're working from a client workstation where you have HANA Studio. Provided your client workstation is connected to internet, if it's online, you select that backup area and click on that HANA answers. That will also give you help. But actually that help it will gather online dynamically. At that point of time, it will gather that information from you for you from some selected sources. It will get that information from help.sap.com, scn.sap.com, even support.sap.com. Any SAP notes kind of information you have, that also will be given to you. So it's highly advanced help, you can say. But imagine how much information will be displayed to you. A lot of information you'll get. They tried it, but in that HANA Studio, when so much of information is displayed, it's becoming a more of a distraction for the people to work with. That's why SAP stopped it. They stopped support for this from SPS 9. Instead of that, what they're suggesting is you just go to search.sap.com, where you can search for whatever the information you need. It may be related to any of the SAP products. It need not be only HANA, any SAP product. So that's something which they tried. And similarly, they have this Shine SAP HANA Interactive Education. So whenever you want to have a demo system, generally use it for demonstrations and training purpose. If you install HANA database, it's just a blank database. There is nothing in that. At least for demonstrations, trainings, you need to have some ready-made models, some sample tables and all that. So once you install database, if you install this Shine, you'll get all those ready-made models which can be used for demonstrations and training purpose. That's what they call it as SAP HANA Interactive Education. So that also they provided. And another new thing now, which SAP started providing somewhere in SPS 8, they started with something called HANA Spatial. So this will allow you to analyze geospatial data. It's official now. SAP HANA is being used in space researchers also. So whenever you want to analyze your geospatial data, they have some special procedures available which are provided by using this component called Spatial, SAP HANA Spatial. And then there is also one more tool called IC, Information Composer. This Information Composer is available right from the first version, SPS 03 itself. Some people they use it. Sometimes it's useful. Information Composer. It's a small tool actually. Actually, this is a tool which is meant for non-technical business end users. A tool which is meant for non-technical business end users. Understand this? Now question comes is, why do you provide tools to the end users, business end users? You take this scenario, here what they do, they set up HANA database, they load data from different sources into HANA, then they build some models, and top of that they build a report, and report will be given to end user. What end user does, he'll execute the report, he'll analyze the data, that's it. Just a report will be given to the end users, he'll perform analysis of the data by using that report. If that is the case, why do you need to provide this information composer, the tool, to the end user? Now here is the business requirement. Understand this. Suppose in that company there is one sales manager, and that sales manager desktop is having couple of Excel files where he's having some sales data. Two Excel files is having where he's having some sales data, a reasonable volume. So each Excel file is having 50,000 records. So you want to analyze that sales data available in Excel files. So is finding it more difficult and time consuming to analyze the data by using Excel. And he knows that in the company there is HANA database running. What you want to do is you want to use the power of HANA database to perform analysis of this data. But his requirement is like this. Understand the terms what I'm using here. This is important. What that manager want to do is you want to perform instant ad hoc analysis. Instant ad hoc analysis you want to perform. Instant means immediately. Ad hoc. What do you mean by ad hoc? Ad hoc means it's not fixed. It keeps on changing. Okay, if that is the situation, is this procedure is suitable or not? Try to understand. Suppose he's having some data in Excel. If you go with the standard approach, what is the standard approach? They need to use some ETL tool and load the data into HANA. And then they need to build data model. Then on top of that, they need to build a report. And finally, that report need to be given to the end user. And then he can perform the analysis of the data. Loading is done by one technical person. Models are built by one technical person. Report is built by another technical person. And finally, it has to be given. How much time it will take for all this? It will take time. It may take days. But he can't wait for so much of time. You want to perform that instant analysis. And the second word we are using is ad hoc analysis. Suppose putting so much of effort, technical people, they build a report. What that sales manager is going to do is he's going to use that is only once, just only once, where he's not worried about format, logos, titles, all that is immaterial for him. So what's the point in putting so much of effort developing some report which you are giving to end user where he's going to use it only once in a lifetime? Next moment he'll come up with the different analysis requirements. So that's why in these kind of situations this will be very helpful. What you can do is you set up information composer tool on any machine, Windows machine, as an administrator. You can establish a connection to HANA database, and then you give access of this information composer tool to that sales manager, and he can access that through browser. He doesn't need to have anything else there, just a browser. He can open browser, will give a URL. He can type that URL, he can open that information composer. So once he goes to that information composer, simple facilities, there is a button, upload. If you click on upload button, it will ask you which file. So whatever that Excel file is having, he can select and load it. He can name it, okay, this is my sales data 1, another Excel file, sales data 2. So he'll just button click, select the tab, that file, automatically data will be loaded into HANA database. It doesn't know where exactly this data is stored. It doesn't need to know. The data will be stored in a table which will be automatically generated by system. And whatever the data I loaded will be visible to him, saying that okay, this is sales data 1, this is sales data 2. Then there itself is having a simple wizard, compose wizard. So where he can compose the view by combining the data of these, whatever the sales data he loaded, he can combine the data using union, join operations. Simple wizard. He can filter, he can select required columns, he can apply some aggregations like sum, average, all these calculations, and just click on finish. Output will be displayed in the browser itself. You can do it instantly. All this loading and then composing that view you'll be able to perform in a matter of 2-3 minutes. You want to have another type of analysis, next moment another composing. Data is same but a different kind of composing with the different columns, different aggregations you'll be able to perform. So that will be helpful in such situations. So remember that information composer is a tool which is meant for business end users, non-technical business end users, to perform instant ad hoc analysis. Instant ad hoc analysis. So all these different software components SAP is offering. So this is some of them. So there are a few more. So there are some more things which you need to know, and then we can go to that enterprise editions. Okay. So we'll continue our discussion on this furthermore. And tomorrow also we are going to discuss about some more components. Actually, there are some important components we are going to discuss which are so crucial, like what you can see in this diagram, that landscape diagram, like something like SLT, data services and all that. So that will be discussing in tomorrow's session.